tonight we have Chuck Smith. Chuck's a friend of mine because he's also a kayak guy and builds amazing kayak paddles and kayaks. But he's going to be talking about a sailing adventure. He bought a boat 3 hours from his home, but decided that it was a much better idea to take a 700-odd mile trip with 2 people and a dog, all new to this boat, and sail all around the state of Michigan, through the straits of Mackinac, and have all kinds of experiences. So he'll be telling us about his amazing adventure. Chuck is I get along well with Chuck because he's a lifelong water person and likes sailing and kayaking and windsurfing and all things about the water. So take it away, Chuck.
All righty. Anyhow, as Fran said, I'm Chuck Smith, and what she didn't mention is I'm not so smart. We're looking for a sailboat, so yeah, sure, let's buy one close to 200 miles away that is going to cost me thousands of dollars to truck here, or I'm going to have to sail all the way around Michigan. Good plan. Perfect. Anyhow, the synopsis called 730 miles, 2 Great Lakes, 2 humans, a hound, lighthouses, all sorts of stuff. The plan was we launched the boat in May, spend all winter working on it, launch in May, spend May driving back and forth, making friends with the boat, learning how it works, and leave on June 1st. It's the 2020s, right? So we know that plan is not what happened. Here's the boat. That's how she spent the winter over in St. Joseph, Michigan. That's almost to the Indiana border. It's 25 miles away from Indiana. But that's our boat. Here's our route, just so we can get a feel of it. And here's where we started. And here's my house. So not that big a deal in a straight line, but somebody put a whole lot of land in the way. So yay. 40-some-year-old boat. The last 10 years been somewhat neglected, so lots of work to do to make it safe enough where I thought I could bring it around without undue problems. Hound dog was a supervisor. She wasn't always looking too impressed. This is what the boat looked like for most of the winter, just torn apart. I went through all the wiring, all the plumbing, and made things safe enough, good enough. Finally, we get her in the water. And one of the things I did right is the people I bought the boat from have a luxury condo that they rent as an Airbnb. So we had free access to the condo with a free boat well and back. And that's a 30-foot sailboat in probably a 60-foot well. We're not in a low rent district. It was rather nice. So hound dog's making friends with everything here. June 1st, we're losing our well, so we've got to be gone and on our way, which works into my schedule. Everything is good, except it's a boat. This over here is a gasket for the toilet that picked May 31st to go bad and start leaking profusely. So spent the next day and a half rebuilding the toilet. Sheila, my other half, spent the next day and a half shopping. Here's food and stuff for the boat. And she asked me how much food. I told her about 4 days worth of food and about 4 days worth of emergency stuff if we get stuck. We ended up with having to do basically no shopping on our entire trip. We were seriously loaded with food. Anyhow, eventually we get on our way. And if we left on June 1st, the weather forecast was perfect. We'd have 3 days of wind that would push us all the way to Mackinac and then get what we get. So Here we are coming out of the St. Joseph River through a drawbridge, and then there's a swing bridge for the railroad, and pretty neat. Perfect day, no breeze yet. We get out on the lake and there's no breeze. It's like glass. There's shipwrecks all over the place in the Great Lakes, and most of them are marked, well, many of them in scuba diving depths are marked with buoys. I'm an active scuba diver, so we saw what we thought was a shipwreck buoy. Like, hey, let's go check it out. And this is what happened. Tell us about picking up our first shipwreck buoy.
This did not turn out to be a shipwreck buoy. But I got it on the first try. Who knew that sailing was about huffing helium?
What she do for a living, she's a college chemistry professor. So just wild stuff. Here we are coming down towards sundown, and we're coming into Holland, Michigan, which is absolutely beautiful, but this is as most wind as we've seen all day, maybe 5 miles an hour. So not an auspicious start. Here's a lighthouse in Holland. Lots of pictures fly around Facebook of the Holland Lighthouse in the wintertime because that entire thing will get encased in ice. And it's an impressive structure. And that's our first night sleeping on the boat. And stunningly beautiful, not a puff of breeze. Not a puff of breeze means we can set up the full kitchen and eat pretty well. And Sheila did wonderful keeping us fed. We wanted for nothing. And boat's got a fridge and basic cooking facilities. I was up at 5 in the morning, wide awake, and I'm like, hey, let's get moving. If we get moving, we can stop here. And the weather was perfect. My great grandfather was a ship captain, and his ship went down here, got washed ashore on the beach in 1886, killed everybody. But the wreck is right here somewhere. And it takes a really unique weather circumstance to get a boat in there safely. And we took my boat in, we looked for a couple hours and couldn't find it. But it was pretty neat to have the opportunity to at least take a look. There we are motoring up. Not a puff of breeze. And as we're coming away from the Conway, we did get a little bit of breeze. We got a sail up for maybe a half hour. So it looks like a sailboat now, right? Here we end up in Pentwater, Portage Lake. It's just a little lakeside town, but it's beautiful. Ice cream stands, the whole bit. And Michigan has ports or harbors every 20, 30, 40 miles around almost all the Great Lakes, and they're a wonderful place to hang out. Next day, we're motoring up to Frankfurt because there was very little breeze coming from the wrong direction. And anybody who's traveled with me knows I can't go anywhere without meeting somebody. And that includes the middle of Lake Michigan. A friend of mine bought a boat in Wisconsin, kind of a unique boat. He's bringing it around. We're nowhere near a straight line, but I look over and there's not many of those boats in the Great Lakes. I send him a text. Hey, Tim, is that you off Arcadia? He says, yeah, I'm the sailboat 1.5 miles to your right. And he's a scuba diving buddy for 20 years. So we're going to the same place, trying to beat the same weather. But we ended up tied up in Frankfurt for 3 days. And on the left picture here, it's starting to get a little bit breezy. As we got in the breakwater, all hell broke loose. We knew there was a storm coming, and this breakwater is 4 feet high, and you can see the spray coming in. Our timing was good, but we ended up staying in Frankfurt for 3 days due to weather. It was windy. We got to play tourist. I go feral pretty quickly if you take me out of civilization. So self-portrait or Sheila taking a portrait of me. And we broke the dog. Hounds aren't really acclimated to boat life, but she likes us, she'll go along with anything. But her tail here is bent way down, and it's Sunday, small town Michigan, no vets, we don't have a car. So she seems okay. It's severe pain if we touch it, but if we leave it alone, she's okay. Fast forward a little bit, we talked to some vets. It's happy dog syndrome. She wore out her tail. It was just an overuse injury. Pelicans were close to the last thing I expected to find in northern Michigan, but there they are. It's the best picture I could take with the camera I could grab while I flew overhead. Pelicans. Frankfurt does have an ice cream joint that caters to dogs. And better yet, friends of ours are absolute galloping gourmet gardeners and live about an hour away. So they sent us a message, said, "Hey, you want anything?" I said, "Yeah, we've been living under a rock in the pandemic, so come on down, let's have a burger." And they raided their garden, brought us some fresh veggies, which was wonderful. Eventually, after 3 days in Frankfurt, we got underway again. And here's some of the sand dunes up in northwest Michigan. And they're gorgeous. A lot of kayaking events happen just to the right of this picture. But we're headed to South Manitou Island, and the mechanical gremlins start rearing their heads. Over here are my engine mounts, and I've got a mount loosening up over here, and this is what holds the engine to the boat. This bolt is backing itself out. Before leaving, I checked pretty carefully that I had assorted appropriate wrenches for anything on the boat. I didn't check the engine mounts. Previous owner had the engine out and serviced. I know the mounts are going to need to be retorqued. I didn't have a big enough wrench to do it. So in one day, we stopped 5 times to retighten those. The engine gets out of alignment. It gets very expensive. Over here on the right, this is the drive shaft worth about $500. And this is dust from the drive shaft getting thrown everywhere because things are out of alignment and it's eating itself. So, oops. That's how boats work. There's always something. But we did okay. We got in, we cut our day short, ended up pulling into Northport. Here's Feather Dog, learning to use her ears as a weather vane. So we actually had a bit of breeze, wrong direction, no sails up. And cruising is the art of fixing one's boat in exotic places. Here I am playing with the motor mounts again. You can see I've got electronics jury rigged, just good enough to get us home, but got a lot of that view. This was floating around Lake Michigan somewhere. Northport's a pretty neat little town. There's a northern pike checking out the breakwater we're on. And Feather Dog saying, yeah, the wind's blowing towards the right. On the left here is typical morning view. On the right there, the dog parade. We're a little early for it, but our kind of town. From Northport, we were headed up to Beaver Island, which is northern Lake Michigan. It's northern Lake Michigan is one of the meanest places in the Great Lakes. There's a huge reef that goes most of the way across the lake. Beaver Island is an outcrop of that lake. And the weather forecast was nice. The weather in reality was not. Here I am tying myself into a harness because the waves are getting big enough to start coming over the front end of the boat and rolling on back. And I'm not in any danger here, but I'm the only one that can steer the boat. So I've got to be on my game. Here's what's going on down below. See if this will play for us. Yeah, that's supposed to be a video. But we're rolling 20 to 30 degrees. The dog is down below tossing cookies. Sheila's down below trying to comfort the dog. And this is where we learned about ship shape. Everything in its place, everything secured. I'm kind of a fanatic about that. Sheila became a fanatic about that. This is why. There's our video. Let's begin to roll. Yeah, this is about 4 hours until the turn, and then we were rolling to the north. This is the aftermath. We pulled into Beaver Island, little bit of a crash landing, plenty of people on the dock to help, but mean, nasty. I passed out for about an hour. This is the only time in her life Hound Dog has ever crawled on top of me, and she absolutely passed out on top of me. And Sheila cooked us up a nice meal. This is a nice nesting cook set, and this is a stovetop oven called an Omnia oven. So we ate pretty well, but I was absolutely done. Here's the weather. I don't know if this is when we came in or the next day. We ended up stuck on Beaver Island for a day. But it's whitecapped in the harbor. The snow is blowing pretty well. And our next day is going through a trade breeze, which is mean. So we definitely wanted nice weather. So we got to play tourist in one of the neatest places in the Great Lakes. Hound Dog had enough at this point. So we're over here. She ran around the seawall here and around the harbor and through the turnstile and onto the ferry that goes over to the mainland. And this is about 10 minutes before they leave. So Sheila says, hey, Feather got on the boat. So I run around, I jump a couple of fences, I jump through the turnstile. The ticket takers are looking at me like, what are you doing? So dog, they're just laughing. They're all pointing that way. She's on the boat. And I find her on the boat. She's basically saying, yeah, I'll see you on the mainland. Everybody's just laughing. It's absolutely hilarious. But she came back. We went to breakfast, a restaurant, and she made a friend. And that was fortuitous. And his father's friend has known her, David, and David is local. He's building a place up there. And he was bored, so he offered to be tour guide for the day or part of the day, which we took him up on. And Beaver Island has a fascinating history. If you're ever bored, Google it. It's the Mormon church has early roots there and basically had the island, and they got run off at the point of muskets and bayonets and started their trek out west. Interesting story, but there's lots of history going back. There's a stone circle on the island. It's ancient Native American. It is currently and has been in continuous use by Native Americans. There's offerings here and there, and it's groupings of stones laid out in various ways for various astronomical events. And it's a pretty neat place to wander around. So we spent some time there, and there's offerings of trinkets or jewelry or coins, tobacco. And after we got back from that, the dog discovered a new trick. We've got a harness for her on the boat, so she's at least attached. But she figured out if she flops over on her back, we can pull her around and it rubs her back. And this is one of the first times. And it's probably her favorite thing in the whole world these days. But it was just funny to watch. And we're coming up on going through Gray's Reef, and lots of planning, lots of bailout points. Dog's not too interested, but I've got a few charts I'm marking up, trying to figure out, okay, if things go great, we do this. If things go less great, we do that, just so we have a plan. And what happens when a dog is nervous, really nervous? They blow their coat. The same thing also happens with Sheila's. So we had dog hair, Sheila hair everywhere, which is a problem because it can get in our bilge pumps, and then we can't pump water out of the boat if we need to. So while I'm planning, Sheila was literally swabbing the decks. And when we were done, there were about 2 inches of hair in the bottom of that bucket. All sorts of silly things happening. But one thing about being a treacherous area is there's lighthouses everywhere. And it was somewhat hazy when we came through. And Gray's Reef is, 2 miles long and maybe a third or half mile wide, the channel through the reef. And coming up to it, there's rocks and nastiness everywhere. And a whole lot of the time we could see 3, 4, 5 lighthouses at once. So pretty impressive coming through there. I'm glad to have all the electronic gadgets. And here's Hound Dog doing the feather vane thing again. Ears flopping in the breeze. This is we're motoring into South Manitou Island. Very popular backpacking destination. The freighter off through the haze, that was a normal view. On the right here is the lighthouse on South Manitou. And when we came in the day before, we were quite a bit closer to land, and we never saw land, we never saw the lighthouse. We couldn't see it at all in the fog. Between GPS and radar, we did all right, but it was a little bit nerve-wracking. Here's a view of the Mackinaw Bridge. Most people don't get. Looking up from below. And on the right here is a very, very happy Sheila. Happy to get a Bloody Mary. Happy to not have to cook dinner. Get a nice warm burger. Life was good. And we plan to play tourist for a couple of days, day or two on Mackinac, and that worked out splendidly. I looked on Facebook, and a friend of mine, Charity, was on Mackinac Hotel a few hundred yards away. So sent her a note, said, "Hey, come on down." So haven't actually been in person with her probably 5 years. So that was pretty neat to catch up. And yeah, we found him. He's on Mackinac. Our friends that brought us the veggies have a plane and said, "Hey, you're in Mackinac, let's go hiking." So they flew up and we had nice hikes around the island, nice meal. And once again, Feather Dog found a potential way to escape, but we didn't let her get on the plane. And got to have a horsey view if you're on Mackinac to prove you were there. The Round Island Lighthouse. And on the right here is another picture, just Hound Dog getting some leg stretches in on the island. She was very appreciative of that. They're not made to be cooped up on small boats. Sheila getting her sea legs a little bit and working up on deck, getting a little more comfortable. And just a puff of breeze from the wrong direction, so we're still motoring. And here we are in Presqu'île, which is a beautiful little harbor, but now we're in Lake Huron, northeast lower Michigan. And old lighthouse there, a little museum, and not much else, a little party store, but beautiful harbor. If you're a scuba diver or a shipwreck hound, seeing something like this on depth sounder is the holy grail. And we've spent days looking for shipwrecks we couldn't find. And this was a shipwreck. I just punched the numbers in the GPS that brought us directly over it first pass. So didn't want to take the time or the risk to scuba dive something that deep alone, but it was neat to go right over the top of it. And more motoring. And over here is a little bit of my navigating. Every half hour or so, you should write down position on a chart or mark it on a chart. But if conditions are nice, I just take a picture of our GPS coordinates with my cell phone. If something goes wrong, I can at least refer back to it. And the cell phone is a completely different system that never touches or talks to anything else, so it's unlikely to be corrupted. But just a quick little cheat. Works backpacking too, if you're close enough to civilization and care to carry something heavy, useless like a phone. I did bring an underwater drone because we were going over some of the nicest wrecks in Michigan, and I couldn't bear the thought of not doing anything. So here's a little bit of drone footage. And this is a wreck called the Nordmere, which ran aground in 1966. My dad was actually part of the salvage effort, hauling off rolls of steel. I've got a porthole that came off that wreck. It was pretty neat to send the drone down. And full screen here, I can't zoom around too much. We got to use the drone in Mackinac because Hound Dog tossed her leash off the dock and had to go down and get it. But through the years, the ice has seriously munched up the wreck. And let's see. That's me with all the electronic gadgets, trying to figure out how to make friends with the drone, make it work, not get tangled up. On the right is my jury rig for our autopilot. We're out there 10, 12-hour days, and steering by hand gets old, so autopilot is priceless. Had a bad electrical connector, and I couldn't figure out how to get the thing apart. So cut it off, put a couple spade connectors on, good enough to get home. And boats largely work that way. It's nothing unexpected, especially buying a strange boat and sailing it hundreds of miles home. Things are going to break. Just figure it out, keep on going. Here we are pulling into Port Austin, which is right at the tip of the thumb of Michigan. And usually I'm there as part of a kayak symposium, so I'm used to seeing 100, 200 kayaks on that beach. It's unusual for me to see that beach completely clean. And on the right there is Hound Dog actually following the rules and leaving no wake. For once, she's being a good dog. It didn't last long. As soon as we tied up, she was off exploring other boats. 100% Hound Dog. Continuing on down the coast, we ended up in Lexington, small town of Michigan's thumb, with this Rolling Thunder kettle corn my dad started and sold and bought his fishing boat with that money. And then I ended up using the fishing boat to buy the sailboat. So kind of a weird circle of life thing, but it was neat to chat with those people for a while. And then right here, we're coming into Port Huron, right at the bottom of Lake Huron. And this is my home stomping ground, so I'm starting to relax a little bit. At this point, I've got friends that live along the shore and everything else. We have no worries. The feather vane wind indicator again. Blue Water Bridge there on the left. And coming underneath the Blue Water Bridge. And right about now, for the first time on the trip, we start getting a little bit of nasty looking weather in daylight. And now we're in the Lake St Clair, which is my home waters, and we can see Detroit over the horizon. And it starts to rain, and it saved the best until we were actually pulling into a marina for the very first time. Hard to see where we're going. I'm pulling into a marina, and we didn't know it, but we were pulling in during the new member welcome wine tasting. So we had an audience of about 100 people while I'm pulling in for the first time. So yay. And there we are. She's home and we made it. And all in all, it was a great trip. I'd do it again in a heartbeat, but preferably on a boat I was a little more familiar with. Our previous experience on a boat before leaving was a total of 4 hours in one afternoon. But it was a lot of fun. Questions, comments, if we unmute?
So can you see the chat, Chuck? There's some questions in the chat if you can.
Yeah, just
See that.
found it. It's hidden a few menus down.
Yeah, I know. And you can stop share. If you stop sharing, it's probably easier to see.
Yeah, but less entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, no wind. Does that mean you kept moving by motoring? Yes. We put well over 100 hours on the motor. About 30 gallons of fuel total, but we motored all but a handful of hours. Part of that is I didn't trust the rig that much. I hadn't inspected it or repaired some things. And part of it is we missed our wind window when we left. And the entire time up Lake Michigan, we probably sailed for an hour and maybe 3 hours total coming down Lake Huron. We're just plain motoring. How to curb the dog. Dogs are survivors, right? And we tried pretty hard to get her ashore every day. We couldn't always. And she went for 24 hours with no bio breaks. And finally, she was turning yellow and crossing her legs. We had some AstroTurf up on the deck that we tried to train her to use. Hounds aren't the easiest thing to train. And eventually she figured out that was as good as it was going to get. So she did her business. We dragged it beside the boat for a while, rinsed it off, and all was good. And she got better about it. And she still would rather not go on the boat. Question I was hoping for, considering the amount of work needed, what made me settle on that particular boat? Lake St Clair is very shallow. Sheila and I like to poke around the small bays and things, which means we need a boat that doesn't draw much water. I narrowed it down to 3 different models of boat. And the O'Day 30, which we ended up with, was number 1 on the list. In an average year, there's 3 of them that come up for sale in the country. And I looked at several in my price range, which means cheap, that were absolute junk. They were totaled. And we found this boat, and it was, pretty decent condition. 40 some odd years old, so it needs work. But overall, it was always owned by someone who cared for it. And price is right, location was right. I wanted to be very picky about who I bought the boat from. I found the perfect sellers. It all worked, but geographically it was inconvenient. But no big surprises so far. Everything's working. How long was your trip? 19 days, and 5 of those were weather days. So 14 days moving. And the crazy thing is, rule of thumb for cruising without killing yourself, call it 50 miles a day. And our moving days averaged out to 55 miles, so right in there. But the highest day was 81 miles, which hurt. That's the day we looked for the Conway. And that was probably 15, 16 hours underway. But it's June, right? You can do that. The days are 16 hours long. And some of the mechanical days were 20 some odd miles. What kind of motor and fuel cost? It's a 2-cylinder, 14 horsepower diesel. Fuel cost, call it nothing. I go 10 or 15 miles to a gallon. We burned 30 gallons the entire way around at $4 a gallon, so maybe $120 in fuel cost. Would have cost me more to drive my car. How many nights did we stay out? We planned on most of them. I think we were actually out 3 nights, mostly due to logistics with the dog and weather. If I knew we were going to get stuck by weather, I'd rather be somewhere I could get a burger and a beer or a pizza. And that works pretty well. These days, where do I use my boat the most? Lake St Clair, that's where I live. From my easy chair to my boat is 5 minutes, and I can be 5 minutes down the river and I'm out on the lake. It's small water, but it's where I live. Were the stars out? Usually not. They should be, but June is a weird month in the northern lakes. The land is warm and the water is cold, so fog is prevalent, and we had lots of fog days and fog nights. Some of them we could barely see past the point of the boat, into the boat. Yes, the boat has a name, which is Two Flower. Terry Pratchett wrote a whole bunch of fantasy novels, fantasy satire. One of his characters is Two Flower, who is the first tourist in the world. And his thought is if he never gets involved, nothing bad can happen to him. So obviously that's not what happened, but we thought it'd be a fun name for the boat. And Hound Dog is Feather. For whatever reason, I usually call her Hound Dog. Any multi-day trips planned? Yes, but COVID makes planning interesting. I'm self-employed. When I can get parts or availability for stuff, who knows? I'd love to get up to the North Channel area, northern Lake Huron, Topmore area this coming summer, but that's in Canada, so the border has to be open, and I've got to be able to get enough work done to be able to leave because it's just me. So who knows? Kind of boat. That's a 30-foot 1979 O'Day. She's got a centerboard, so she'll float in 3.5 feet of water, but the centerboard can drop down like a big keel, so it will sail efficiently. And that was the biggest reason I wanted that particular boat. They make a 28 that was on the list, and there's a couple other boats that were on the short list, but an O'Day 30 was what I was looking for. And all in all, worked. Anything you brought but found you didn't need? Yes, my entire duffel bag full of clothes. Northern Lake Michigan in June, snow was a real possibility. I came equipped for cold. I didn't bring a pair of shorts because the odds of needing them were 0. So a lot of days I was wearing my skivvies because we had days that were 85 degrees out in the middle of Lake Michigan in June. Statistically not possible, but there we were. I tried to buy a pair of shorts on Mackinac. I couldn't. Everybody else got there first. Anything I forgot and wish I'd have brought? Yeah. 2 sizes of wrench or a giant ratchet. And I actually bought a big ratchet on Beaver Island. But for those engine mounts, that was a serious problem. Oops. Can't have everything. Planning on a dinghy? Yes, we have a dinghy, which made the entire trip with us and never got used. It's kind of a cheap blow up, roll up, but we've got a dinghy and electric trolling motor that works pretty well. And that's the only way we can get to shore unless there's a dock. So gotta have it. Scuba ship? Yep. I had my full scuba gear with me, hoping I wouldn't have to use it. But anchors are crazy expensive, so I don't want to have to cut one loose if it's stuck on something. The whole area we went is rock and logging territory. There's old logs, there's old ships, there's all kinds of stuff to lose an anchor on. And it called it $500 for an anchor at a road. I don't want to cut one loose. So thankfully I didn't have to use it. Yeah. Any more from anybody?
On your motor, how fast can you go? Is it? I guess it's in knots or.
Knots, miles an hour, whatever. Use miles an hour, but displacement boats like sailboats have a hull speed. A boat of a certain length can only go a certain speed, no matter how much power you give it. And our boat, that works out about 7 miles an hour. But a planing hull can get up on top of the water and scoot. The displacement hull start pushing a bigger and bigger wave that it can't climb. But about 12 horsepower will power us at 7 miles an hour and burn less than half a gallon an hour. So it works. It's not fast, but it works. How many sheets? Well, 2 per sail time. Well, that's not true. 1 main sheet, 2 sheets on the Genoa, and 1 sheet on the Spinnaker. So 4 sheets. And we used them all. We only used the Spinnaker for about 10 minutes because it became very obvious to me we needed more knowledge than we had. And we're in northern Lake Huron, and I'm thinking, there is no plan B if something bad happens here, so we can't have anything bad happen here. So we put the Spinnaker away and got a little more knowledge and training when we got home. The Spinnaker's a big, huge sail for sailing downwind, and it can make bad things happen in a hurry.
Any other questions from anybody?
A couple more coming in.
Oh, okay.
Now, the engine mounts aren't safety wired, and generally they don't need to be. If they're properly torqued, they'll stay tight. The motor was recently taken out and serviced and put back, and after about 10 hours, the mounts need to be retorqued. I didn't do it. I forgot to bring a wrench, and it bit me. So user error, not really design error, but that one's on me. How many years have I been sailing? My entire life, but when I was up to about 16, 17, had a little 12-foot sailboat. Then I got into windsurfing and power boating until about 5 years ago. We bought a 22-foot sailboat, and last fall we upgraded to the 30. Yes, I grew up on the water. My dad was the second scuba dive instructor in Michigan. So that was my background, is we had a giant pool in the backyard, or we lived on the water my entire life. I've always had boats of some kind. I've got the keys to more boats than I can count, friends or customers or whatever. So I'm a water rat, kayak, windsurfer, scuba dive, any kind of boat, whatever. It's born and raised, didn't fall far from the tree.
So did you say it was your grandfather that was involved in a shipwreck?
Yeah, it was my great grandfather.
Your great-grand-
He went down with his ship in 1886. And a little bit prior to that, he was a ship owner and captain. And his wife was also a captain. She was one of only a handful of female ship captains on the lake. But great grandfather was a ship captain, and his son was a firefighter. And then, you know, it's a genetic defect that goes way back.
So he actually went down with the ship, huh?
Yeah, the entire crew and the farmers on shore watched it happen for 3 days and did nothing.
Wow.
We've got lots of accounts of that, but they watched it happen over a period of days.
What happened then?
Just a November gale, and they got driven on the beach, and the anchors weren't holding, and they basically froze to death, washed ashore. They found everybody except my great grandfather and his wife, and his brother was a member of the life-saving service, and he took a little time off and was walking the beach, and 2 weeks later found him on the beach.
Oh, wow.
But the guy in the life-saving service actually left the life-saving service to come to Detroit to run the first power boat the Detroit Police Department ever had. And that boat's in the National Museum of the Great Lakes now. So, you know, genetic defect.
Interesting.
But why didn't the farmers do anything? The best guess is they wanted to steal whatever they could from the crew of the ship. That was not uncommon. And some of the crew were found with things that weren't theirs. So the best guess is they were pillaged, and somebody knew the cops were coming, so they went and put stuff back. But the stuff didn't all get back to the right person, back to the right body. Yeah, dog eat dog world, but even 100 years ago, things were quite a bit more harsh. But yeah.
So I see another question there about radar. What type came with the boat?
Nothing came with a boat, and I called up my friends with the plane because they live on a bluff that overlooks Traverse Bay. Said, talk to me about fog. And they just started laughing. They said, anytime with no warning, it could last for minutes, hours, or days. I said, really, 2 o'clock in the afternoon? I said, absolutely. Said, okay, understood. So it's a Raymarine quantum radar I installed before we left. And Sheila thought I was nuts because that's a couple of $1,000 unit. And after day number 4, she's saying, now I understand why you insisted on radar, because it would have taken us another 2 weeks to come around without it. We couldn't have safely moved. Spreader, yeah, we're mounted just above the spreader and works great. My home water is the Southern Lakes. Radar is strictly optional. The northern part of the lakes, fog is unpredictable. There's heavy shipping traffic. Radar, in my mind, is pretty much essential. Yeah, mounting, yeah, just standard radar mount on the mast. man, it worked great. But I had enough electronics so we could see a freighter coming. There's a system called AIS. They're sending out electronic signal, who they are, where they're going, what's their course and speed. So I could see that at all times. And then I could correlate that with the radar and at least know where the big guys were. So that was a big help. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't transmit AIS, so I can see them, but they can't see me. No, I won't even knock the paint off their boat. And I've got friends who captain those things, and there's nothing they can do if I get in their way. There's absolutely nothing they can do about it. You know, they can't stop, can't turn. So, yeah, the radar was a good purchase.
Is there a way of keeping track of what's on the bottom of the lake? So you don't run aground and on the Great Lakes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I get back to it here? Here is actually the same screen as the radar, but I've got 3 different depth sounders on the boat. And this is telling me it's 150 feet deep. By the colors and a whole lot of practice, I know it's a sand bottom down there. And this is actually a shipwreck laying upside down on the bottom. And it's one of the most important pieces of information I can have, which is why I've got 3 different depth sounders on the boat, all wired independently. In my home waters, I know my way around. If I get outside of that, a whole lot of the Great Lakes are very mean and very shallow, very rocky. So got to have it. When we were actually coming into South Manitou, I lost our primary depth sounder. Reading went to 0. So I was frantically connecting up the transducer for this one, got it going in a few minutes. And we were in 400 feet of water. The reason I lost the previous one is it will only read down to 300 feet of water. But we were making a landfall in heavy fog, and I wanted to know where the bottom was.
That's a Ray Marine. Is that what your radar is too? Did you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This is a multi-purpose display. I can display about anything on it. And directly under it is another Garmin GPS receiver that I can display about anything on. Underwater drone. I didn't know they existed. Somebody sent me a link, said, this is kind of neat. So I did a stupid amount of research and bought one shortly before the trip. Didn't really know how to run it. But I work on the water. I drop stuff in, having a way to get it back is pretty convenient. And like I said, we're going over some of the nicest shipwrecks in the world. I wanted to at least take a look. And the weather really never let us do that, except the 1 or 2 I had the video of. But we'll get some use out of that. They're expensive, but neat toy. Yeah, the hound dog was fun. I got racing out of my system mostly in my windsurf days. And I was pretty good. Racing sailboats gets expensive fast. Sail for my boat's $1,000, $1,500. A racing sail for my boat is close to $8,000. So if I do the race thing, it'll be on somebody else's boat. And I belong to a sail club, and they're heavily into racing. So all I have to do is show up on race night. Yeah, a lot of work. Crazy amounts of work. Any boat is crazy amounts of work. And it's best if you're bad at math and never really add up how much it costs. Happy or not knowing.
Okay, any last questions for Chuck? Well, maybe people are questioned now. Very interesting, Chuck. Thanks for presenting to us.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the chance to relive this a little bit.
Very interesting story. So I hope Hound Dog is doing okay.
Yeah, she's a survivor.
That's good. That's good.